So, let's just jump right into this. I want you to imagine something. You're a detective, right? A woman vanishes, and your prime suspect? He's a rich, powerful lawyer with friends in all the right places. Problem is, there's no body, no murder weapon, no crime scene, nothing. It looks like he's actually committed the perfect murder. So, how do you possibly find justice when all the evidence is just gone?
And this is where the story gets a real chill down your spine. These are the last words Marie Fahey ever wrote in her diary. Just hours before she disappeared for good, she thought she was finally free. What she didn't know was that for her powerful ex-lover, Thomas Capano, her freedom was something he was never, ever going to allow.
Okay, so let's back up a little. To really understand how this all went so wrong, we have to go back to the start of a really toxic relationship and the first few days of an investigation that honestly seemed impossible from the get-go.
So on one side, you've got Thomas Capano. This guy was a big deal in Delaware, tons of power, tons of influence. And on the other, you have Marie Fahey. She was a high-profile political aide, and she was trapped in a secret 3-year affair with him. Now, he'd buy her expensive gifts, but he always kept her hidden. And she told her friends that underneath all that charm, he was this deeply manipulative, angry guy who wanted to control, every single part of her life.
The last time anyone saw Anne-Marie alive was at this dinner in Philadelphia. She was there with Capano, and she was there to do one thing: tell him it was over for good. A waitress who was working that night later said you could just feel the tension at the table. Anne-Marie barely ate anything, barely said a word. That dinner, it was the end of their relationship, and as it turns out, it was the end of her life.
So 2 nights go by, and the alarm bells finally start going off. Anne-Marie, who was known for being super neat and organized, doesn't show up for a dinner party. Her sister goes to her apartment and finds it in a total mess. And the details are what's really telling here. Groceries are just left out on the counter, her wallet and ID are there, but her keys are gone. This is not what someone does when they plan on leaving.
When the police finally talk to Capano in the early hours of the morning, he's totally calm. A little too calm, you might say. He says, yeah, we had dinner, claims they parted as friends, and then he throws this out there. He says she was moody and suicidal, and maybe she just, went away for the weekend. And here's the kicker. When they ask to search his house, he says no. Claims his kids are sleeping. Big red flag.
So with Anne-Marie officially a missing person, the whole case shifts gears. The investigators, they're pretty sure she's been murdered, and they have one suspect, Capano. But they were hitting a total brick wall, because as a former prosecutor himself, Capano knew exactly how to cover his tracks. He was setting the stage for what he thought was the perfect crime.
I mean, just look at what the FBI was up against. No body, no weapon, no physical evidence that a crime even happened. Their main suspect is this incredibly powerful guy who everyone respects, whose friends just can't believe he'd ever be capable of murder. It was pretty much a prosecutor's worst nightmare. And then a tiny crack starts to appear in his story. You know what they say in these cases? Follow the money. An assistant U.S. attorney is digging through credit card records and spots this one weird charge. Just 2 days after Anne-Marie vanished, Capano spent $38 at a carpet store. Now, why would a guy living in a rental house suddenly need a new carpet? For investigators, it was a chilling thought. He must have rolled her up in the old one.
And check out how that one little receipt helped them build their whole case. Investigators tracked down Capano's housekeeper. She confirmed the house was spotless right before the disappearance. Then, Capano calls and cancels her next visit, saying the house is still clean. But when she finally comes back 3 weeks later, the love seat and the carpet from the living room are just gone. That was it. That was the probable cause they needed to finally get that search warrant. The search of Capano's house was painstaking. I mean, they were meticulous. Teams moved all the new furniture, they searched every single corner, and then, on a baseboard, barely even visible, they found it. 2 tiny little brown spots. The FBI lab in D.C. confirmed it was blood, and then, after finding a blood sample Anne-Marie had donated, they got a DNA match. It was their first real piece of physical evidence. But look, a couple drops of blood, that's not enough to get a murder conviction. The FBI knew Capano had to have had help, and they had a pretty good idea that one of his brothers was the key. So this is where the investigation takes a huge turn. The strategy shifts. To break through the Capano family's wall of silence, they were going to have to turn brother against brother.
And this was a huge gamble. For almost a year, they ran an undercover operation on Jerry Capano. They found out he was using drugs and illegally collecting guns.
So they raid his home, find all the evidence, and then they put an absolutely impossible choice in front of him. Either you go to jail and leave your wife and kids, or you tell us exactly what your brother did. And Jerry cracked. He told investigators everything. How his older brother, a guy he looked up to his whole life, showed up at his door at 6 in the morning, the day after Anne-Marie disappeared. He just begged for help, totally preying on that family bond, manipulating Jerry into helping him cover up a horrifying crime.
Jerry then described the gruesome events that happened next. Tom shows up with his huge cooler, so heavy one person can't even lift it. They drive out to the coast, take Jerry's boat 60 miles out into the Atlantic, and try to dump the cooler. But it floats. So in a panic, Capano shoots it, and it still floats. Finally, the millionaire lawyer opens the cooler, pulls out Anne-Marie's body, and wraps it in heavy boat anchors to sink it.
And this is the moment that sealed Tom Capano's fate. Jerry told the investigators he couldn't bear to watch, but as he turned back around, he caught one last, haunting glimpse of a calf and a foot as they disappeared beneath the waves. The perfect murder was completely falling apart.
So with Jerry's confession, investigators finally had a story. They knew what happened, but they still had to prove it in court, against a brilliant lawyer and without the single most important piece of evidence, the victim's body. This was the final challenge, making a jury see a crime that had been totally erased. And then something absolutely astonishing happens. A local fisherman calls the FBI. He'd been reading about the case in the paper and realized that a cooler he'd found just floating at sea months earlier might be the cooler. And get this, it had 2 bullet holes in it, exactly like Jerry said. They even traced the barcode back to a cooler Capano had bought with his credit card. I mean, you can't make this stuff.
So at the trial, the jury hears 2 totally different stories. The prosecution lays out a very clear narrative. Capano was a jilted lover who planned this murder for months, even had his other mistress buy the gun for him. Then Capano gets up there and stuns everyone. He admits he got rid of the body, but he spins this wild story, claiming that his other mistress accidentally killed Anne-Marie, and he only did it to protect her.
Well, the jury didn't buy it for a second. They sided with the prosecution. And in a truly historic verdict, Thomas Capano was found guilty of first-degree murder and sentenced to death. It was the first time in the history of Delaware that anyone was convicted of a capital crime without a body, without a murder weapon, and without a confession.
The Capano case really is this powerful reminder of what incredible police work can achieve. And it's a testament to the idea that nobody is above the law. But it leaves us with this really tough question. When a killer's smart enough and powerful enough to erase every single trace of their crime, how far do we have to go to find the truth and make sure justice is actually served?